Television star Nick Cannon was fired by Viacom CBS on Tuesday after making anti-white and anti-Semitic remarks during a recent podcast. What did he say exactly? Was that worthy of cancellation? Did he apologize? What happens to his job at Fox? Stay tuned until the end and let's find it out together. Here we go! Hi guys, welcome to Reality Explaining. Subscribe, share, find us on Twitter and Parlay. Help voices of common sense like ours grow. Thank you. As many of you know, Nick Cannon was fired last week by Viacom CBS after making racist and anti-Semitic remarks during an episode of his podcast Cannon Class with Professor Griff. Well, this source, meaning Wikipedia, acknowledges anti-white racism. In fact, the whole title about this controversy is called Racism Controversy, as you can see here. Several commentators have stated that nobody's talking about this. Well, here we have the first reference. There's more. Cannon endorsed conspiracies about Jewish control of finance, claimed that the Jews had stolen the identity of black people as the true Hebrews, and cited Louis Farrakhan, who's labeled as an anti-Semite by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Cannon also made black supremacist statements calling white people savages who are closer to animals, claiming the only way that they can act is evil. Let's hear a piece of his podcast.
Then let's go to what it really is then. When we talk about the power of melanated people, when we talk about who we really are as guys and understanding that our melanin is so powerful and it connects us in a way that the reason why they fear black, the reason why they fear is because the lack that they have of it. So then when you see what, Dr. Francis C. Welsing talked about is that fear in that
just genetic annihilation,
deficiency of when you have a person that has the lack of pigment, the lack of melanin, that they know that they will be annihilated. So therefore, however they got the power, they have the lack of compassion. That melanin comes with compassion. Melanin comes with soul. That we call it soul. We soul brothers and sisters. That's the melanin that connects us. So the people that don't have it are a little, and I'm gonna say this carefully, are a little less, and where the term actually comes from, because I'm bringing it all the way back around to Minister Farrakhan, to where they may not have the compassion or the when they were sent to the mountains of Caucasus, when they didn't have the power of the sun, that the sun then started to deteriorate them. So then they're acting out of fear, they're acting out of low self-esteem, they're acting out of a deficiency. So therefore, the only way that they can act is evil. The only way they have to rob, steal, rape, kill, and
fight or flight,
in order to survive.
Exactly.
So then these people who didn't have what we had, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people. They had to be savages. They had to be barbaric. Because they're in these Nordic mountains. They're in these rough, torrential environments. So they're acting as animals. So they're the ones that are actually closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages. And then they built up such this I don't want to say warrior, but they built up such this conquering barbaric mentality.
There you have it. That was crazy. Those comments on melanin are nuts. Melanin comes with compassion, with soul. He really is avoiding the statistics of black on black crime, the murder rates within the community, committed by black men. Just look at the 8 black kids, 8 children murdered by black men just this month. What compassion? Melanin comes with compassion, with soul? Then why black men represent the biggest population getting women pregnant and abandoning them? Why does he think the term baby daddy became part of a language in the nation? Missing black fathers. What compassion? There is no scientific relationship between melanin and compassion. These are two very different things. Compassion is not a matter of race. You can have it or lack of it, regardless of your melanin levels. Then he cites Farrakhan. That guy is nuts. White people have no compassion? All major charities in the world were funded by white people. Just look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. White people banned slavery. White people fought the Civil War to free the slaves in the country. There are so many other millions of examples. Again, having or lacking compassion is not a matter of melanin or race. Anyways, white people don't lack melanin. That is not accurate. Albino people lack of melanin. But Caucasians do have melanin in their skin. That kind of narrative of us versus them is just stupid. The compassion or lack of it is something that should be measured individually. Remember the principle of individual responsibilities? Compassion is not a matter of race. That's anti-reality. Compassion is a matter of a personal decision. The power of the sun? What kind of ancient philosophy BS is this? The sun started to deteriorate the people in the Caucasus? That's exactly the opposite of what happens in a place with low sun radiation. What deteriorates the skin is too much sunlight, not the lack of it. That's anti-reality. This guy is full of pseudoscience. White people have to rob, steal, rape in order to survive? If he was trying to refer to the European colonizers of past centuries, that came out very wrong. He made that statement in present tense and generalizing, like if the whole Caucasian population all over the entire planetary sphere's surface behaves that way, which means he believes that current white people also rob, steal, rape in order to survive. Nuts! And he said so many lunacies in so little time. Here are the rest of them outside this piece of video. Here is the US Sun. Loose cannon. What were Nick Cannon's racist and anti-Semitic comments and who fired him? So we have here the second reference to racism by a black man towards white people. The Sun addresses racist and anti-Semitic comments separately, and it's clear that racist and anti-Semitic are different. This is happening. We have established media acknowledging anti-white racism and black supremacy bigotry. This is an advance towards a factual understanding of racism and how it can be committed by anybody from any race. This also reminds us of Terry Crews calling out black supremacy sentiments in previous weeks. This was what he was talking about black people who think Africans and African descendants can do no wrong. We have had reposted this in previous videos, linked above if you want to check them out. Cannon and Professor Griff, his guest in the podcast, said that black people are the true heroes and that Jews have usurped their identity. Cannon said, when we are the same people who they want to be, that's our birthright. We are the true heroes. True heroes? First of all, who comes with that idea of sub-Saharan Africans and by extension their descendants being the true heroes? We understand Hebrew as an ethnical group whose original language is Hebrew, a synonym of Israelites, Israelians, Jews, all of them with a cultural background in the Middle East, far, far away from sub-Saharan Africa. It's not even in the same continent. Palestine is located in Asia, not Africa. Now, if Cannon was referring to the Africans and African descendants to be the ones chosen by the Middle East god El of the Jewish mythology, that makes no sense at all. Ancient Africans had a very different mythological polytheist background. Do you know how someone might come up with that idea? Introducing black supremacy. Wikipedia describes black supremacy as a racial supremacist belief which maintains that black people are superior to other races. The term has been used by the Southern Poverty Law Center to describe several fringe religious groups in the United States. Fringe religious groups. So you know it's about biblical evangelism, specifically charged with a racial level to make followers feel superior. There is no doubt that that is a direct response to white supremacy groups also strongly rooted in biblical evangelism. So you know the whole thing is just incoherent and crazy, as the Bible and evangelism themselves. He continued, those without dark skin have a quote-unquote deficiency that historically forced them to act out of fear and commit acts of violence to survive, he said. They had to be savages. Adding that he was referring to Jewish people, white people, Europeans, among others. Well, it's well known by now that black men commit 50% of the crimes in the United States despite being only 6% of the population. And black men in America are 8 times more likely to engage in felonious activity than white men. So it's clear that his rhetoric is not landed on reality but just bigoted, prejudicial statements to attack Caucasians just for the color of their skin. Does that definition sound familiar? Yeah, that's the definition of racism, anti-white racism in this case. Now, some simps of Cannon are stating on Twitter that he's supposedly right because a small percentage of Europeans colonized other people's lands and subjected other fellow humans to, for example, torture and slavery, in a clear reference to European colonizers and the slave trade. Our question for them is, who sold the African slaves to the European colonizers? Yep, other fellow melanized Africans. Plus, the amount of European individuals engaging in colonization in previous centuries is a tiny micropopulation compared to the overall European people of those times. It's not accurate to state that every European of past centuries was a brutal colonizer. That's anti-reality. And we can remind Cannon also that sub-Saharan Africa has been inside the thick web of horrifying and hyperly genocidal conflicts of, again, black people killing other black people. And they have been in that pattern for centuries. And remember, before anyone say that it is because of the historic influence of Europeans in the area, let's remember that no one forces you to commit crimes. No one. It's a personal decision. And this is the problem with identitarians. They want you to focus on their group instead of the individual crimes that an individual in that group have committed. This is the context that we have to preserve. The personal responsibilities of individuals instead of their identity on a group. In this case, a race. They might say, well, if they will have had a proper education, do you mean a proper European-like education? Keep it together. Do you hate modern education based on rational thinking or not? That education was created in Europe by Europeans. So, Moving forward, here's the New York Times. Viacom's CBS fires Nick Cannon citing anti-Semitic podcast remarks. The network said that Mr. Cannon has promoted hateful speech during a recent episode of Cannon's Class. Viacom CBS is the parent company of MTV and the cable channel Teen Nick, both of which prominently showcased Mr. Cannon for years on various platforms. Mr. Cannon had worked as an executive producer and chairman of Teen Nick, and he also has been a host and executive producer for the MTV comedy show Wild 'N Out, so he lost millions with his comments. People on the other side of a political spectrum are also getting cancelled. This has become more equilibrated. A Viacom spokeswoman said, "We have spoken with Nick Cannon about an episode of his podcast which promoted hateful speech and spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories," she said. Hateful speech and anti-Semitism. Here's another media company acknowledging the two things: hateful speech and anti-Semitism. Bigoted black people are being held accountable. This is not only one way, it goes both ways. We're advancing whether we consider this measure appropriate or not. While we support ongoing education and dialogue in the fight against bigotry, we are deeply troubled that Nick has failed to acknowledge or apologize for perpetuating anti-Semitism, and we are terminating our relationship with him. He later met with Rabbi and released this statement on Facebook. On my podcast, I use words and reference literature I assume to be factual to uplift my community, but instead turned out to be hateful propaganda and stereotypical rhetoric that paint another community. Undoubtedly, a damage control strategy perfectly crafted to avoid losing his other job as a host of the Fox show The Masked Singer. The New York Times continues. In a statement, Fox said that it immediately spoke with Mr. Cannon about the situation and he was satisfied with his response. He is clear and remorseful that his words were wrong and lacked both understanding and context, and inadvertently promote hate. Fox said in the statement, Nick has sincerely apologized and quickly taken steps to educate himself and make amends. The statement continued. On that basis, and given a belief that this moment calls for dialogue, we will move forward with Nick and help him advance this important conversation broadly. Well, he saved his job at Fox by now, and he's fighting to get full ownership of the show Wild Out, but full rights of that show belong to Viacom CBS, so The conclusion of all of this is that black people can also be cancelled, whether it was for the anti-white statements or the anti-Semitic statements, whether you might like cancel culture to be used against those who apply it and their allies or not, it's happening. And for us, it's refreshing to see that it's happening in both ways and not only one. Also, it's great that we are already having an online conversation on anti-white racism and black supremacy bigotry. These are real issues and we deserve to talk about it. This was our reality explaining on this topic. What are your comments on Nick Cannon's statements? Was the Viacom CBS firing appropriate? Was Fox's continuation of his contract appropriate? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to engage. Don't let fictions take over. Speak, comment, tweet, share this content. You can support our work at Patreon and subscribe with the username RealityExplaining. Thank you in advance. See you in the comments.